And we have the Hawking Plan. Junior Democratic Senator Thomas Hawking has introduced a bill which will see the relief efforts largely funded by taxing American corporations in exchange for hefty tax considerations down the line once the economy has recovered. This has caused considerably wow, some bad grammar there. Considerably controversy in some corners, especially among AFP and SPA supporters. Others say it would be far too easy for the next government to reverse the decision, leaving the corporations holding the bag and even worse off than they were before. Regardless, there is enough support to see the bill passed, and as an added bonus, the agency to coordinate the efforts could be placed in either Minneapolis or in Charlotte, with the added bonus of new employment weakening our AFP and SPA strongholds. And then we can either base it in Minneapolis or Charlotte. Since I do want Minnesota to eventually join the revolution, I am going to choose Charlotte. And then we'll do the New Industry Act. We need to kickstart heavy industry in America's heartland, where the Great Depression has hit the hardest. It'll essentially help to boost up our industry a little bit, which is definitely something we could use. And then we have the Stanley Cup. It's between the Detroit Red Wings and the Toronto. So, who's going to win, Detroit or Toronto? And Toronto wins the Stanley Cup. Yeah, we'll win next year. Yeah, that little event doesn't really do much, and it's kind of a 50-50 thing that can happen, but it's always kind of fun. It seems like the Russians have the edge here so far. And then, on the opposite end of the political spectrum, we have more SPA members announcing congressional bids. While there have been a number of lawmakers from the Socialist Party of America in the past few decades, particularly in the Steel Belt, the 1936 election represents an unprecedented number of people registering to run for office under the banner of the SPA, and just as many, if not more, nationwide, pledging to vote for them. And then we have some special elections here. Let's see, two of them, one in New Jersey and the other in Washington. The first one in Washington is between the socialist John F. McKay and the Democrat John Mainkoff. In this instance, I'm going to go with John F. McKay. And then in New Jersey, we have the Democrat John Gerald Milton against the America First Party member Charles Lindbergh, who, if for those of you who aren't familiar with history, was the first person to cross the Atlantic via airplane. On the spot. Wow, I'm having difficulty talking today. I apologize for that. But for this one, I'm going to go with the Democrat. Yeah, Charles Lindbergh, in like the 1920s, was the first person to cross the Atlantic in a single flight. He flew from, I believe, New York to... But yeah, I know he landed in Paris, but I took off from New York. And then we have Oswald Mosley, elected as chairman of the TUC. 1936 Trade Union Congress in the Union of Britain was made out to be decisive. Longtime chairman of the TUC, Philip Snowden, declared his resignation, causing the four major factions in the Union, Maximus, Nomis, Federationists, and Congressionalists. I believe that's what it is. Oh, Congregationalists, to butt heads over the position. And as the dust settled, Oswald Mosley, leader of the Maximus and a totalist ideologue, has been appointed the new chairman. Mosley's faction supports strong central government and full state control of the economy, and are much more in favor of military action and British nationalism than any other faction. Kind of interesting, though, because in actual history, Mosley was a fascist. See him as a syndicalist in this timeline is kind of interesting. A few more days left on for those little things there. How are we doing construction works? Oh, wow, we're actually getting through this pretty fast here. I think I'm gonna fortify our borders here a little bit. Panama pressures Costa Rica, and well... Oh. May Day riots. May Day, the International Workers' Day. This is a holiday that the Socialist Party celebrates with numerous parades and speeches, and has since its founding. Generally, things are peaceful, though there have been confrontations with the police. However, this time things are more violent than normal. Clashes between the Socialists and the local police, backed up by the AFP, have occurred around the country. The question, though, is who was at fault? Socialists declare that things were peaceful until the police and the AFP goons arrived on the scene. While on the other hand, the AFP is saying that the Socialists began by assaulting ununionized workers, and have blurry photos they claim are guns the ASP were brandishing. And for this instance, in order to bolster the Socialist Party's power, we're going to say they were at fault. Costa Rica's offering assistance, and we'll give them that assistance. And looks like Panama's backing down too. And that's a victory for the Monroe Doctrine. Just kind of fortifying the border here a little bit. New tanks will be good. Let's upgrade the arch. Yeah, the arch too. And progressive flock to the ASPA. Minnesota, which has been a bastion of the progressive Senator Floyd Olson, has finally flipped. Many people are turning away from Senator Olson on the direction of the IWW and SPA. Various unions have held rallies for the SPA, and it as far outstrips our ability to outshout them. Is there something in the water? And essentially that basically puts the Progressive Party out of action. Yeah, it's non-existent at this point. Just under 1% of popularity in the country. Actually, about a third of people support both the establishment and the FP respectively, while almost half support the socialists at the moment. But we'll change that here with this one. New Industrial Act. As an offshoot of the Hawking Plan, relief efforts will see new industrial growth in several vital areas, primarily the military sector. Several of these new companies are planned for Denver, Colorado. At least one other area can be promoted, and Cabinet believes that putting them in depressed areas, which are currently strongholds of the AFP or SPA, may see their influence in those areas drastically weakened. We can either put it in Minnesota or in Tennessee. And for this instance, I'll put it in Minnesota. We have a shipyard funding scheme then, which essentially we can do contracts similar to what we've done already, but in two areas that have ports, so. What was I doing? Oh, okay. And what's there? Okay. Let's go check the war on Russia here. Every time. But it doesn't look like it. Things have really changed much. But this is pretty important to know, though. The death of Big Bill Hayward. Today, one of the titans of the industrial workers of the world, William Big Bill Hayward, has passed away. His death marks the passing of a torch. Elizabeth Gurley Flynn spoke at the funeral, saying, "History has a long-range perspective. It ultimately passes stern judgment on tyrants and vindicates those who fought, suffered, were imprisoned, and died for human freedom, against political oppression and economic slavery. Many other leaders within various union organizations, including his rivals in the AFL, also spoke at his funeral, as well as leaders within the Socialist Party of America. Jack Reed also spoke at the funeral, ending his speech with some of Hayward's quotes. "If the workers are organized, all they have to do is to put their hands in their pockets and they will have got the capitalist class whipped. The strike is an incipient revolution. Many large revolutions have grown out of small strike. Remember that you are fighting more than your own fight. You are fighting for the entire working class, and you must stand together." I already miss him. And that increases syndicalism a little bit in the country. All that different here. And similar to how the progressives flock to the SPA, we have Southern Democrats aligning with the AFP. The South has long been considered the heartland of the Democratic Party, but this may not be the case for long. As polls show massive spike in voter registration for the AFP, one radio broadcast, Huey Long spoke at length about the Share Our Wealth program and his plans for America. It seems that the AFP is growing stronger by the day. What a devious con man. Hoping the Soviets push through, like I said. If they can get here, that'd be good too. Basically cut off any forces they'd have in that area. Oops. Too far here. Yeah. One thing... oh. Never mind. But essentially, it looks like we have a dictatorship established in Argentina. Yeah. I'm not gonna basically read that, but essentially his hopes is to take Argentina, and essentially reassert itself in the region, take back Patagonia, which is under control of the syndicalists, and expand Argentina's territories even farther. But apart from Patagonia and Chile, Mexico is also a pretty well-known syndicalist country at the moment. So the Mexican Revolution was able to succeed, and hence the syndicalists were able to take power. So, not really all that important at the moment, but still is pretty interesting. And then we have a pretty extensive heat wave then. So, not gonna really read this one because it doesn't really impact us too much, but it does lower our stability quite a bit. What's their war doing here? And the Russian Republic appears to have more casualties than the Soviets do. And then we have a coup d'etat in Siam. Bangkok today, that group of officers and intelligentsia calling themselves the unrest or People's Party have successfully seized control of the government. So they've taken control of the country and captured the king. Interesting to see what happens there, then. So I know sometimes it can lead to civil war depending on what they do. Oh my. They're launching a full-on assault now. Shipyard funding scheme. The Hawking Plan has led to two major shipbuilding companies vying for a federal contract, one in New York City and the other in Corpus Christi. Both would mean a large number of jobs in the area and would be a boon for our control over the region. Problem is that word of the contract has gotten out, and whichever city we don't choose will likely be enraged. Yeah, I'll give the last one to Minnesota, so I'll give this one to Texas, which is an AFP stronghold. Yeah. And then Red Summer. The summer heat has turned into violence as and blood as cities, starting with Charleston, South Carolina, throughout the country engaged in bloody racial riots as whites beat up blacks and burned black businesses. The number of lynchings that occurred throughout the country spiked during the summer. In response, the African Blood Brotherhood and other elements of the SPA and the CSA have begun arming and fighting back. The Socialist Party of America have defended their actions and have furnished blurry photos they claim to show AFP members in a lynch mob. Should probably choose the next focus here then. Well, demand war debts paid. The United Kingdom incurred an enormous war debt to us during the Weltkrieg. That debt has now been inherited by Canada. While it's unlikely Canada could repay it now, demanding repayment will appease isolationists in Congress, whom we believe will join the political fringe if not appeased. And we'll do just that. My cat here too, that's pestering me. We have Gone with the Wind that's premiering today. So I'll see it as support of their actions. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. And more news from China. Basically, just some stories from the region. Don't really care too much about that, so it's still quite an adventure. Oh, this is an important event. MacArthur speaks to Hoover. MacArthur has spoken to President Hoover privately about a contingency plan called War Plan White, a military plan for dealing with possible armed uprising of U.S. citizens. Plan would call on MacArthur to take emergency action to protect the country and re-erect old barricades in Washington, D.C. This plan can be engaged even from outside Washington, D.C. at the Washington Arsenal. While the plan has obviously not been made public, we at least have it at the contingency if the radicals enact one of their revolutions from within the government. Let's hope that it is not needed. Ooh, yeah, and Soviets are definitely on the counter-offensive here, taking back a few of their territories. And they're starting to push outward, too. Like I said before, I hope they win. How's our construction going? It's making some progress. Let's make that yet. Okay. Just not a whole lot happening here, it would seem. And the Partito Socialista Italiano wins the election. The Fifth Congress of the Socialist Republic of Italy has ended, with Partito Socialista Italiano led by Submod T-E-O-T, forgive me, I don't really speak Italian, achieving a majority of seats in the government. Their victory marks change towards a more moderate socialist syndicalism within the Republic. Moderate socialism, we shall see. And like I said before, about radical socialism, which is what the ruler of the Socialist Republic of Italy is now, they are essentially like democratic socialists. So, and Liberia asked for aid in an effort to counter the effects of Black Monday, and we'll help them out. And Poland elects a new king. For almost 2 decades, the Polish throne has remained empty. After the end of the Weltkrieg, a regency council was convened to elect the new Polish king. However, consistent interference and ineptitude has prevented the council from selecting a king for all these years. But now, after many weeks of intense debate inside the chambers of the Polish Regency Council, the decision was finally made to elect a new monarch to the long-vacant Polish throne. The coronation of Mindog III was held in the palace at Warsaw early in the morning, and has been followed by parades and celebrations throughout the nation. It remains to be seen whether the new king can navigate the small Polish nation through the coming storms. The sea is finally over. It's pretty interesting, because Mindog III is actually the same ruler as in Lithuania, I believe. Yep, and actually I was just about to get to that. And it looks like it went that very thing. Both countries are unified now, and Lithuania is reborn. In a surprising turn of events, the elections for the vacant throne of Poland have resulted in the restoration of a state thought to have been forgotten in history. Despite pressures from Austria and Germany, King August III von Ulrich of Lithuania has been elected as the new king of Poland, and a new constitution was drafted to unite Poland and Lithuania back into the Commonwealth. It is not known if the new entity will be very stable, but the Poles seem to be very enthusiastic. That was unexpected. But, yeah, those two countries there have been reborn, and looks like we have peace then in the east here. And like I said, too, the stuff that happens in China is still relatively new, so honestly, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen here quite yet. And we have the Battle of the Overpass. In Detroit, Michigan, the automotive capital of the world, Walter Rutherford and Richard Frankenstein, the leaders of the United Auto Workers Association, held a general strike against the Ford Motor Company and proclaimed themselves for unionism, Fordism, demanding higher pay and fewer hours of automotive workers. At 2 p.m. today, a photographer from the Detroit Free Press asked to take a photo of the leaders of the UAW standing over the overpass with the Ford sign in the background. While they were poising, a group of 40 men from the Ford Service Department approached them from behind and began to beat them with their batons. The group then continued their attack on some of the beret-wearing women present to pass out leaflets. This indeed will hurt us more than us. One thing I should mention too is that this mod does have its own soundtrack too. A couple of albums actually, but I'm actually just using the vanilla soundtrack from Hearts of Iron 4 just so I don't get hit with copyright claims. So that even though it's its own thing, it has been known to cause some issues with other people. And we'll see what happens then at the end. And as expected, Canada refuses. The Canadian government has responded to the demand with a flat refusal. The debt, they say, was never meant to be repaid until the home islands were retaken, as most was incurred by the United Kingdom, a government which is now in exile. Even so, their refusal has done its job and fired up the isolationist elements of the American government. President Hoover's government has the support it needs at the cost of relations with Canada. And so be it. And in response to this, we will pass the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. Canada has refused to repay its war debts, unsurprisingly, and thus in return our only option is to pass punitive tariffs on the Entente goods imported into the United States. That will put some money in our coffers, though repairing relations with Canada will take a long, long time. Oh. There, that'll... Violence reaches the political theater. Whoop. Oops. For some time, the violence has been mostly between supporters of the radical parties. However, recently, the violence is now reaching the candidates and politicians themselves. Failed attempts on the lives of both Huey Long and Jack Reed have occurred in the past few months. Both gunmen shooting from a crowd, both failed, and both resulting in higher security. Several more local politicians have been stabbed during a campaign rally. Moreover, voters from both extremes are turning a blind eye to violence done by their enemies. There we go. Some anti-air guns. I know. And hello, Milo. So you want to say hello? For those who want to see him, this is my cat Milo. Don't know if he's been on videos before, but yeah, that's my second cat apart from mom. He's a good boy. Definitely likes his attention. And speaking of people who want attention, Huey Long speaks. And while I can read this myself, I am actually going to let the Kingfish himself give this speech, actually, because it is an actual speech that he gave in the past. So, without further ado, here is Senator Huey Long.
The Democratic Party and the Republican Party was just like the old patent medicine drummer that used to come around our country. He had 2 bottles of medicine. He'd play a banjo and he'd sell 2 bottles of medicine. One of those bottles of medicine was called Hypopolora. And another one of those bottles of medicine was called Lopapahara. Finally, somebody around there said, is there any difference in these medicines? Oh, he said, considerable. They're both good, but they're different. He said that Hypopolorum is made from the bark off the tree that we take from the top down. And that Lopapaharum's made from the bark that we take from the root up. And the only difference that I found between the Democratic leadership and the Republican leadership was that one of them was skinning from the ankle up and the other from the ear down when I got to Congress.
And that's the speech. Yeah. Huey Long was definitely an interesting character. It's that he's also known as the dictator of Louisiana. It's that when he was governor of Louisiana in the 1930s, he definitely did a lot of controversial things. So while he did improve the state quite a bit, he essentially ignored the rule of law in a lot of cases. He ended up getting assassinated, though, in 1935. So, but apparently in this timeline, he was either A, never assassinated, or survived it. And the Great Heat Wave is over. And then we have a war between the 2 houses here in Arabia. So it'll be interesting to see if the Saudis or whoever's in charge of this one here. Or them. So either one of them will come out. And then we have representatives retiring. Many representatives and the Republican and Democratic parties have announced that this year will be their last year in Congress. While many retirees claim old age motivated them, rumors of gang intimidation by the SPA and AFP congressmen reminds many of the congressional brawl between Charles Sumner and Preston Brooks. The unprecedented rate of their retirement has given hope to the AFP and SPA that they can win these open seats. Yeah, and that weakens the establishment of Congress then quite a bit. Here's that the Soviets definitely are on the offensive here. China just continues to have wars between its various states here. Oops. I'm gonna put it there. Putting these forts here, just in case. Too much. Some radios. Oh. This is an interesting turn of event. We have a revolution over here in German East Asia. Essentially, we have the Viet Cong rising up to give themselves independence in Indochina. And it appears that the Saudis were able to win that. Not exactly that surprise. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens here, because either they'll win in the end here and take over all of Indochina, or they'll be suppressed by the Germans. And like I kind of thought too, the Saudis were able to in here. And then we were able to pass the bill. What's that then? And we'll reform the military then. The United States War Department has seen a shrink over the last half-decade through austerity measures. Now it is vital that staffing be expanded and new innovators enter the department ready for reform. Yeah, it's that essentially since the United States wasn't involved in World War One, it has no real experience, honestly, or well, basically the experience, as well as the lack of doctrines, is really impacting them. Imbalance between the SPA and AFP. A number of major city conflicts between supporters of the America First Party and Socialist Party have broken out in violence. Partisan fistfights and even shootouts are starting to become regular occurrences throughout the country as the country spirals ever deeper into chaos. While the public eruptions are easy to counter, the enclaves these radicals have cut out of city blocks run on graft are harder to stop. This decreases our stability, but increases the support of the establishment. And things are pretty evened out, honestly. About a third of each faction so far. The Progressive Party is 2% again. It's kind of interesting, though, because in the establishment section, the Democrats and Republicans are kind of flipped on what they are today. The Democrats are the conservatives, while the Republicans are the liberals. Yeah. The only reason it really flipped was because of FDR, who basically started the trend. Started improving social welfare programs and passed civil rights, which then made the Southern conservative, who once were Democrats, and switch over to the Republican side. And then everyone who was then Republican before became Democrats. So when you hear people say that the Democrats oppose slavery, just... wow, I totally failed there. Never mind, forget what I was saying there. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is that if anybody is saying that policies back then are the same as they were now, they're blowing stuff out of their ass. Just cannot talk today. It's what happens when you're cooped up in your house for God knows how long. Let's hope this quarantine ends sometime soon. It's driving me nuts. But honestly, recent events are and the reason too why I'm doing this Let's Play in the first place. And honestly, I'm kind of dissatisfied with the current occupant of the White House, obviously, and I honestly see the Democrats as no different. So, a better way to really do it than to play as a faction that overthrows the government. Just a little fun thing to do. And this basically just says what I said before. The U.S. Army is just lacking a lot of the experience and logistics that it would have had it entered the war. And the same goes for the Navy here too. So, let's help them out as well. Negative 57% stability. We should have the election here pop up here and then shortly. Yep. 1936 presidential election. The results are finally in from what has probably been the most ideologically contested presidential election in the United States has ever witnessed. None of the four major parties have secured enough votes in the Electoral College to outright win the presidency, and as a result, the House of Representatives once again has to vote on the winner of the election. This is probably not the end of our problems, but for the time being, victory goes to who? And then we have four options here. We have the Socialist Jack Reed, the America First candidate Huey Long, Democrat John Nancy Gardner, or the Republican Al Landon. And for this instance, we are going to go with the right-wing America First candidate, Huey Long, who, in a lot of ways, is pretty similar to the current occupant of the White House, Donald J. Trump, as both are executives that want more and more power for themselves. And of course, this puts the authoritarian Democrats in power then, and the SPA contests the election results. Remember, the Socialist Party of America have refused to accept the results of our free and fair election, claiming that the House of Representatives system has subverted the will of the majority. Jack Reed has said as much and called the whole Congress reactionary for this injustice. Independent newspapers from inside the SPA have reported that the AFL are beginning to show cracks in their solidarity with Reed. Damn, Reed. It impacts our stability a little bit here too.